Hello, I'm Reed Armstrong again, artist and lecturer for the International Catholic University. Our series is The Sacred in Art. Thus far we've covered the first lecture of the Greeks and their concept of cosmos and the ordered state of being. Second lecture was on Christian art in the East and in the West at the very beginning. Our third lecture was on the universal symbolism of the imagination, which we can use to interpret these religious paintings that we're going to be viewing. We saw then medieval art culminating in the French cathedrals in our fourth lecture. And the fifth lecture was the influence of St. Francis of Assisi on the artistic movement of Italy at his time in the 13th century. Now today's lecture is somewhat different because as before we had a church council of Nicaea which sparked the Byzantine art of the period of the and the letter by St. Gregory the Great to the bishops of France and England to restore the pagan monuments and remove the idols and replace them with Catholic saints and prophets of the Old Testament. And St. Francis, of course, motivating a whole series of artists to produce the work of the Trecento and Quattrocento, which cannot be understood without his influence. Today, though, we're going to talk about a genius and a saint combined in one, and this is, of course, Fra Angelico of Fiesole, who was a Dominican friar and a world-class painter. Now, he has been raised by His Holiness the present Pope, John Paul II, to the level of Beatus, which is just one step below saint of the universal church, and he has been reverenced, in the Dominican order, almost from the time of his death, as being a saint of the church. Now, his cult may be celebrated and is celebrated in Dominican churches worldwide, and he has a feast day now in the universal church. Now, it is really rather unique that in the Catholic Church, in the Catholic tradition, we have very few combinations of artistic genius and what the world calls artistic genius, and is artistic genius, this gratia gratitati, this freely given gift, which, for who knows why, only God knows, a certain person plumbs the depths of the nature of things and brings back visions of universal meaning that we call great works of art. And a saint is, of course, a person who is elevated by the church officially, but a person who has lived a life of total conformity to the will of Christ. There have been some saints in the past, like St. Teresa of Avila or St. John of the Cross, in the world of literature certainly, and even Gerard Manley Hopkins, although not officially a saint or considered by many a world-class poet, combines the religious and the poetic vocation. So we do have artists and saints, some official like St. Teresa, who are considered world-class poets and world-class saints. Fra Angelico, I believe, is the only one that we have in the visual arts who is both of these, and it's a very rare combination. Now, many of the painters, Giotto, as it said, did die a Franciscan tertiary. Michelangelo, who we'll see in our next lecture, certainly died within the bosom of the church with the sacraments and tremendously pious and exemplifying life in his old age. But Angelico, right from the beginning, was both a monk and a painter. It might seem, actually, from a modern point of view, that they're totally antithetical. For example, the visual artist deals with the perception of phenomena. He has an intuitive grasp of the natural order and world. He is, by the very nature of his craft, given to a primacy of the imagination and sense experience over rational analysis. Innate to his profession, as well as the desire to imitate nature, is a powerful drive toward individual self-expression. I think this last part here, this individual self-expression, is the key to why perhaps not more artists are saints. That as the artist is an autonomous creative being in imitation of the Creator, God, there is a sense of hubris that can come in, that any person of genius has a tendency to worship himself and his own creativity and not like to be told what to do. This comes to the idea of Fra Angelico being a religious, a Dominican. A religious ought to be focused not on the phenomena so much, but on the noumenal reality of God. Traditionally, at least, he must possess a sense of personal abnegation before the reality of supernatural grace, and a focus on the kingdom that is not of this world. By his very vocation, he must give a rational assent to divinely mandated authority in a spirit of humble self-denial. And again, this is the key to the sanctity as opposed to the self-expression of the artist. Now, how can these disparate vocations, so to speak, be reconciled? And I think in this case, it is within the Dominican tradition, or really this tradition which I spoke of in the last lecture, of the mendicant orders, Dominic and Francis, giving a new vision to the world. Now, we saw in our last lecture how Francis, through his poetic view, injected this spirit of creation imbued with grace, giving praise to its creator. For St. Dominic, and of course through the great the great end effect of the Dominican order of St. Thomas Aquinas, the great preacher of the order of preachers, it was to intellectually put these two worlds together of nature and grace, the idea that grace can build on nature. And for a being, a wonderful being with a natural talent such as Fra Angelico, this Thomistic idea of nature building on grace and raising it to a higher level took seed and produced fruit. So I think it is a direct result of his Dominican vocation that Fra Angelico could become this rare animal, rare bird, rare creature, the genius and the saint. Now, historically, very little is known about Fra Angelico. Several Dominican biographers of the epoch mention both his talent and his sanctity, but give little concrete information, even to the point of neglecting the dates of either his birth or his death. Our fundamental source of information regarding Fra Angelico is Vasari, whose Lives of the Artists, the standard reference on Renaissance painters, was written some 100 years after the saint's death. The tradition is that Vasari did get a fairly accurate account, in this case from the octogenarian Dominican Fra Eustacio, who was known for his extensive memory of the Dominican history and tradition, this oral tradition that we've lost today, where people would remember and commit to memory, facts. Briefly stated, Fra Angelico, Brother Angel, a name given him by his contemporaries, was born Giovanni de Mugello in 1387 and joined the Dominican order according to Vasari in 1407, but more likely according to modern scholarship in the period between 1418 and 1421, which would make him approximately 30 years of age when he joined the order. He was already an accomplished painter and a distinguished member of the Florentine Artists Guild when he took the habit. Now, this was not exceptional, as there was an already existing tradition of artists, especially architects, entering the Dominican order as grown men at that time. He's first recorded in the 1430s as a member of the community of San Domenico at Fiesole in the Florentine Republic. He did numerous paintings both for his convent and elsewhere during this period. In 1441, he was in residence at the convent of San Marco, built through the largesse of Cosimo de' Medici, where, as we shall see, he decorated the entire convent with an extraordinary set of frescoes. He was at one time prior of this convent, where he showed extensive administrative skill. There is even a fairly well-documented tradition that Pope Eugenius IV, then living in Florence, wished to make him bishop of the diocese. But Angelico declined through humility and continued his career as a painter. He was summoned to Rome by Pope Eugenius on his return in 1447 and remained there after this pope's death to continue his work under Pope Nicholas V. It was under Nicholas' patronage that he completed another of his best-known works that we shall see, the Pope's private apartments in the Vatican Chapel. It is also at this time has been attributed the wonderful anecdote of Fra Angelico's kindly refusing the Pope's offer of a delicious meal in the Vatican because he didn't have his prior's permission to eat meat. It's also said of Fra Angelico that he never painted without prayer and fasting, and that he's reliably quoted as having said, "To paint the things of Christ, one must live in Christ." He returned to the convent at Fiesole in 1448 as prior of San Domenico, and although he continued to paint, little is known of him during this period. He died in Rome in 1455 and is buried in the church of Santa Maria sopra Minerva. There still continues the polemic over whether Fra Angelico was, this is in the art world, not in the Catholic world, of whether he was one of the last of the ancients, one of these true believers, or was he one of the moderns of the humanists? And I think I tried to explain in the last lecture that this particular movement, inspired by Francis and Dominic, and of course St. Thomas, cannot be understood without the influence of these saints, that it is not a medieval view of the world, and it is not a modern view of the world. It is a very Christian humanist view of the world. It was unique to this period of the 14th century up through the 15th century, until the coming of what we call the High Renaissance, when a true pagan humanism did set into the Western world, which brought about the Reformation, but that's on for our next lecture. And to start with, we will have the first authenticated painting we know of Fra Angelico, painted in 1428, first one that we know the date on. And we see here, basically, excuse me, a medieval painting in the stilo greco, as we've discussed before, the golden background of eternity, the mystery of the incarnation placed in this golden background. There are Gothic arches here. We've combined the stilo greco with the French Gothic to an extent here. But it continues in a very medieval vein in the sense that St. Dominic, St. John the Baptist, St. Thomas Aquinas, and St. Peter Martyr over here are all smaller than the figure of the Blessed Mother and the Christ child. This is the fact, that the event of the incarnation supersedes the personalities of the individuals. We see these people grow as this Dominican and Franciscan humanism comes into the church and the reality of the incarnation is made more real for them. the people grow in size. But iconographically, the Blessed Mother is still wearing her blue celestial gowns for purity, and the Christ child in his priestly robes. Next, please. Now, this is from Bernardo Datti's 1330 painting. I just thought I'd put this in here to show you a painting from 100 years before. That it had not changed, except that the people had grown a little bit. That the saints are even smaller, and the people surrounding the donors, than this central event of the Incarnation. Again, a Gothic with a golden background. 100 years, there had been no change in this style of painting used by the Dominicans. Next, please. This is again from the same period, the 1430s, late 1420s, we don't know exactly. The golden background of the Madonna is a darker blue color, but the star is still there, the holiness of her body. The Christ child still has the divine cape. Next. One of the best known paintings of Fra Angelico, which is dated to this same period of 1428 to 1430, perhaps as far as 1445. The date, I'm not particularly interested in dates, except that we're going to see a change here. And this is the painting that hung over the high altar at Fiesole, at his convent. And here we see the Blessed Mother, as usual, in the center here. The saints, we have Dominic, Thomas, Paul the Hermit, and Peter Martyr, have become the same size as the Blessed Mother. This equaling out, this Christian humanist trend in art. Now, the angels are still very small in their circular, very definite circular pattern around the Incarnation, and they are very definitely in the style of Fra Angelico. They have this wonderful diaphanous wings. This is going to become a trademark of Fra Angelico. His painting of angels and angels' wings. This, the G.K. Chesterton, talking of Fra Angelico, who was his favorite painter, said that Angelico's angels have diaphanous wings like butterflies that are light. They're not weighed down by their self-importance. That it's this lightness and spontaneity that is a keynote of Angelico's painting. Now, one thing that makes this difficult to really pinpoint when it was done is that it was repainted in 1501 by Lorenzo Credi. And by 1501, there was very definitely a Neoplatonism, almost into a high Renaissance. And we don't know whether Angelico, for example, painted in a golden background in the original painting, and then Credi painted in this blue sky, or whether Fra Angelico painted in the blue sky in what I would call the Franciscan tradition. We saw this in our last lecture of the Franciscan-inspired Giotto, who was, of course, prior to Angelico, bringing the incarnational message into the real world by painting the sky blue behind it. One thing, again, I'd like to point out these angels' wings, and the idea that it is not static. In the original icons of the Stilo Greco, the Byzantine style, everything is in a picture plane, because you're looking like through a window into heaven. Here we have a beginnings of a circular movement, a worldly sense. It is, the angels are encompassing. I mean, this is a theological as well as an artistic expression. Next, please. Now, this is a close-up of the Madonna of this scene, and you see it's very definitely Angelico. I mean, she's in her blue garments according to the tradition. The Christ child is naked in this particular picture. Now, whether Angelico painted a naked Christ child, certainly at this early period of the 1430s, to me is dubious. It probably was repainted by Credi, because the naked Christ child has more of a Neoplatonic, as we shall see in our next lecture, sense of the divine potential of man. And I think that would not have sat well with the Dominicans with their Aristotelian Thomism, that it's out of place. So we look at a picture, we look at it from the point of view of the theology of the picture. Does this fit within the mindset of the painter? And remember, Angelico is first and foremost a Catholic saint, not an innovative genius. He's always going to submit to the rule of his order. But please again note these wonderful diaphanous wings. Next, please. Now, in this even closer view of the Blessed Mother here, we see the Christ child reaching up to these two flowers. Now, these two flowers are roses, of course, and in one of our previous lectures, I believe on the medieval cathedrals, I mentioned the fact that the rose is a symbol, a natural symbol used throughout history of perfection, earthly perfection. We give roses to our beloved, I mean, as a symbol of perfection. In case I bring roses to my wife to say that she is the most perfect woman. It's perfectly natural to show this, but in this case what is interesting is, these are sort of wild roses, but there's a white rose and a red rose. That in this case, what the symbolism here is that red representing blood and the body and the creation, and white representing always the spirit, is that Mary is perfect in both. Her spiritual and her bodily life are both perfect. She's spiritually and physically the perfect human being. Wonderful. Again, little theological note in the painting. Next, please. Again, from the same period, we see him back with the golden background here, which is, again, leads me to believe that the blue background was painted in by Lorenzo Credi. In a Gothic surrounding, the blue-veiled Madonna with the star for her holiness of body on her shoulder in the Byzantine tradition. The Christ child is not naked, he is veiled. I mean, humanity has been raised up in the incarnation. This is part of this Franciscan and Dominican humanity. Man is not deified by this, but he is raised up to the potential of receiving grace, and through baptism and the sacraments, incorporation and into the mystical body of Christ and the achieving of godhood through Christ. Again, we see this very typical concept of Fra Angelico, of the encircling of the event. That it's part of the circle, of course, is the world, the encompassing the maternal nature, all of this encompassing the divine incarnation, and the saints and angels, these are angels, here too, are of the same size as the Blessed Mother. They have grown in stature. Next, please. Now, one of the most significant paintings of Fra Angelico was painted for the Our Lady of the Angels Church in Florence. Wasn't in his own convent. It's now in the Museum of San Marcos in Florence, hung on the wall. It's not in a church anymore, but it is a supreme example of Fra Angelico as a preacher, because what he is doing here is preaching theology, and it is all according to this Thomistic view and laid out iconographically to express it. What we have here is the coming of Christ at the end of time into the world, the blue sky here, and we have the graves of the dead down here at the bottom, at the resurrection of the just. On stage right, to God's right hand, are the just. Stage left, the right of the onlooker, we have the damned. Next slide, please. Here we see Christ coming in judgment, and we have over here, when we have the Blessed Mother represent, of course, the angels around adoring Christ when he's coming in judgment. But the fact that the Blessed Mother, always on his right hand, we have St. John over on his left, just as at the crucifixion, Mary is dressed in white. White is the color of spirit in liturgical art. We had blue, the color of purity. Red is the color of blood and of fire. White is the color of spirit. So she has been raised up to this level. She is the Queen of Heaven. We have the just. At this level here, Christ coming in, the just on both sides. Next, please. Now, on the right, coming out of the graves, are those who have made it, those who are going to go to heaven. And Fra Angelico, who is very whimsical and very poetic, has them in this wonderful sort of serpentine line walking up the hill to paradise. Paradise, as we remember from our Byzantine iconography, heaven is transcendental. It's male celestial. Heaven is up, earth is down, male is right, stage right. When I say right, it's your left, but it's right of the picture. Remember, Christ is up here, it's on his right hand. So they're going to heaven. Heaven is outside of the natural order. And as these saints come up, are being introduced to the, sent up here to the celestial light coming out of this top corner here, they're greeted by this angel. And I think in the next slide, please, we see this, the angels adoring paradise here, and the greeting of the angel, this wonderful gesture of the angel saying, "Welcome aboard." The body language of these two, I mean, it is just so magnificently delicate. The angel with one hand on the hip, I mean, just standing there, extending out his hand, "Welcome aboard." And over here we have St. Dominic and, of course, St. Thomas Aquinas, not as part of this line of saints coming up, the blessed coming up to heaven. They're just sort of standing there discussing the whole matter of the blessed arriving. They're in conversation. It's a wonderful, I think, little anecdote of Fra Angelico of putting his patrons, Dominic and St. Thomas, sort of there as part of the welcoming committee for the blessed. Next, please. Down here we have, this down closer to the tombs opening up, we have the blessed, and in this picture here we have myriad types of people. It's not just one set, and they all have different ways. They're hugging down here to say that there is a genuine love. People we've resurrected, we've made it. People are talking. There are different kind of hats. There are friars, there are Dominicans, there are Franciscans, there is a pope up here, and each individual is awakening to the glory, maintaining his own individual personality. Now, as a slight digression here, this is a very Catholic theological point that is being made, different from, shall we say, Hinduism or Buddhism, where life is seen as a terrible trap to be escaped through, the reincarnation and reincarnation until you're obliterated into nothing. I know the Holy Father got into trouble for saying this, in his book. Some Buddhists took offense to this, but it is true that their concept of religion is to escape from reality, whereas the Catholic view is to affirm reality. And not being mean-spirited, I think this is why one sees the Holy Father and the Catholic Church as so adamantly pro-life, and the Dalai Lama, for example, pro-choice. If life is just an evil trap to be avoided, why bring people in? I say that is a digression, but this idea of the individual meeting his God in Christianity, you do not lose your own personality, is raised up in Christ, like cells of his body. We maintain our individuality, but we have the chromosomes of Christ and the beatific vision in it. Next, please. Now, one thing here, I point out is that this fellow over here, listed among the blessed, is an alchemist. You can know his Tau cross, the Egyptian Tau cross, and the sign on his forehead up here. And they were rather strange people at the time in the Middle Ages, as we know. And looking back, I'm not sure whether I would have painted this fellow into the blessed, but let's not be mean-spirited. Fra Angelico was a lot more open-minded and, shall we say, congenial, and then so he paints this fellow into the blessed also. Next, please. On the stage left, of course, we have the damned, and Fra Angelico, even though he knows theologically what it is to be damned, as he is a very joyful man, and a man so focused on the good. He really doesn't paint the damned as well as he paints the blessed. Because it's a horrible thing for him to even contemplate. What there is this whole idea of turmoil and chaos. There isn't this hugging and greeting as among the blessed, that there is each individual writhes in his own pain. And here we have the gates of hell, as Dante writes, lose all hope those who enter here. Inside we have what Dante called the bolgi. Next, please. Oh, here we have a close-up of the damned, and among them, I'm sorry to say, there are some religious. There are also just all kinds, knights, all classes of society in Catholicism are called to sanctity. The Vatican II is all of us are called to sanctity, and we will be judged in this sanctity, and no matter what our state, whether we are rich or poor, we are either going to be among the blessed or the damned. Next, please. These are the bolgi of hell, and they are arranged according to the 7 capital sins: pride, avarice, lust, anger, gluttony, envy, and sloth. The people are, of course, writhing in pain. None of us no artist can depict, the pain of hell. And even his demons look, somewhat, we would say, infantile, that hell is a lot worse than Fra Angelico painted it. Next, please. One of the most famous, again, paintings of Fra Angelico that we see all the time in postcards, and it's at the Louvre, is the Annunciation. This was done according to some, there are many conflicting theories, as so much of this great art from the Italian Renaissance, when the Renaissance ended and the different powers came in and broke up the city-states, this artwork was taken off. This was taken up by the French forces from Florence up to Paris. So we don't know exactly where they were originally. But this is the Byzantine iconography, where we have, to repeat if you haven't seen the lectures before, God is always up in his stage right, upper left-hand corner to you, coming in the Holy Spirit. He is transcendental. This is to give the idea that God is other than his creation. He comes in past the creation up here, where we have Adam and Eve expelled from the garden. This is the Garden of Earthly Paradise, coming down to the new generation. This is the old generation, the new generation, coming down. The Holy Spirit comes down to Mary on the stage left side, dressed in blue for purity, who receives the Word of God and believes and sets the redemption in motion. The angel over here, stage right, is the representative of God the Father, that God, again, is in his nature. He is ousia, substance, and hypostasis, person, one and the same. God is Father. It's not like a father. God is Father. So the angel comes in and brings this message. And what Fra Angelico has done here is not only to humanize it, as Giotto had done and Simon Martini, but to give it this little extra touch of a supernatural view. It's natural, with a little bit of grace on top, in that these figures are very transformed figures. The diaphanous cloak of the angel, again, these very transparent, the lightness of it. These are human, it's a real event, but the protagonists here, the gestures, show such humility, such grace. Both are bowing over in their body language, suggesting, after you. No, after you. Neither one is trying to impose a total respect for the will of the other. And of course, Mary covers her heart. This is a quintessential gesture of humility as she accepts as the Word of God is placed in her. Of course, the fruit of this union of God and creation is Jesus Christ, true God and true man. Next, please. This is, the expulsion from the garden. It is not so powerful, for example, as Masaccio's, which we saw in our last lecture, but Fra Angelico has certainly caught this tremendous grief that Angelico was aware of the power of sin to cause sadness. It's not just, some sort of theological abstract idea. This is real sadness portrayed here. Next, please. This is from the predella of the same figure. The predella is the base that goes around the bottom, where there are scenes from the life of Christ. They're much smaller, and the artwork is somewhat more crude, because although Angelico was a miniature painter, he can't get the power into these little pictures perhaps that he could. Still, there is this humanism. The ox and the ass are there. St. Joseph, has this gesture, of awe, of being not quite in it, the smile of the Blessed Mother and the kissing of the feet. It's all very, very human. And he points up with his hand up to, it all started with the Annunciation. Next, please. Crotona Annunciation, the same basic iconography. Fra Angelico is simply playing. He's got a theme which he's just going to work and rework, because iconographically it is necessary to have these pictures out there in the convents, and he obviously must have loved doing it. We have the expulsion up here, God coming down. The angel has a different dress on. And Fra Angelico was a man, although a monk, who had his eyes open to everything. He could have been a tailor. The way he has laid out the folds of the clothing, it shows, he understood drapery. He had looked. These are not just imaginative, I said before in the introduction, the artist and his world of imagination. And over here we have the Virgin still covering her chest, and more listening this time to the angel than just this meeting in the first one. And Fra Angelico normally would put in words into the painting, this combination of the word and the image. You can see here, not too well, but the angel is speaking. He is saying the Hail, full of grace. Next, please. Again, for St. Thomas and St. Nicholas, he vacillates. This is 1430s. He's still in the Fiesole convent, and he does this between the old style and the new style. So this is the golden background, but the saints are, of course, the same size as the Blessed Mother. The angels circling around behind the heaven come in front, the blue gown, the star on her shoulder, her purity of body. The Christ child is naked at this point, but very tender and human. It's a later painting that this idea of the potential of man is coming in, and it's no longer deemed irreverent to paint the Christ child naked, because he, like us, is naked and came into the world naked, and we will be incorporated into his body. Next, please. A close-up of the angels here. Again, we have this theme of the roses, the white and the red roses, that Mary is pure and perfect in both body and soul. The angels' faces, you will see some angels' faces later on, but he has a certain delight in painting angels, and the biographer of Vasari was absolutely convinced that of all the painters, Fra Angelico was the only one that had actually seen an angel. He must have actually seen angels. And again, Fra Angelico was the only artist of the Renaissance that Vasari didn't do a hatchet job on, and because he pointed out the sins and foibles of all the others, whether it was pride, avarice, lust, anger, gluttony, envy, or sloth, but he couldn't pin anything on Angelico. Next, please. This is the floor plan of the cloister of San Marco, just to bring us into his different phase of his life in 1444, I believe, that Cosimo de' Medici came back to Florence and had this convent built. It was kind of his private convent, and he had his own rooms in this convent, and Fra Angelico painted all of these different cells with frescoes. So it was quite a thing for these monks to have 44 cells, all with kind of holy cards painted by this genius saint, to live day and night with these pictures for which they could use for their own private meditation. Next, please. The This is an interior view of the convent of San Marco, and these paintings aren't done by Angelico, they're done by followers. But the idea is the monastery itself was filled. Every nook and corner, as you walked up the stairs or around corners, there are always these holy pictures to provoke or invoke a meditation, to bring you into the life of Christ. That the imagination is always at the service of the faith. And let's move to our next one, please. This is the crucifixion from the chapter room at San Marcos, and it shows St. Dominic at the feet of the crucified Lord. And this is going to be very typical of Fra Angelico and the Dominican school of painting, where the Franciscan school was painting Francis in his life because Francis had had such an impact, and being such a Christ-like figure for the people of his time, his life was associated with and given parallel to the life of Christ, and justly so. For the Dominicans, it is to put Dominic, or to put yourself as a Dominican friar. If you are a Dominican friar having these pictures, or looking at these pictures, you are to identify with St. Dominic and put yourself into the scene. Now, all the saints have told us to do this, from Dominic, Francis, St. Ignatius we'll see later, to put ourselves, to use the imagination, to put ourselves in the scene. How are we going to come to love our Lord unless we can put himself right there, to call into our imagination the suffering of Christ, to see him. So Dominic puts himself in the scene so that we, and especially the Dominican looking at this, or any of us who look upon this painting, will be moved to actually meditate on the suffering of our Lord. Next, please. This is the face of St. Dominic, and again, as Vasari said, that Angelico could paint angels. He also had this uncanny ability to paint, to capture sanctity. Now, how do you capture sanctity? It's very difficult to explain rationally, but as a saint himself, he somehow is able to convey this idea of pain, of hope, of love, all of these things that make up sanctity in this face. Is it the way the skin is drawn? Is it the set of the mouth? Is it the slight frown? All of these things make it up, but it's not any one of these little gimmicks that allows Angelico to paint sanctity. He had to understand from within what sanctity was, and this is how he can paint saints. Next, please. Now, in the cells are these wonderful fresco paintings of the different scenes from the life of our Lord. This is, of course, the Noli Me Tangere of the Magdalene meeting Christ in the garden and thinking he's the gardener. And Christ very gently rebukes her, a very sensitive face, and the body movement is not one of harsh rebuke, it is of gentle, no, not yet, you may not do this just yet. Now, in terms of Angelico, the modern painter, we see these typical Angelico trees. What he's done is he's looked at real trees. He knows real trees. This is a man of imagination who has looked around the world and understands it. But he's beginning to abstract trees into a kind of general form of what the tree is. It's an Angelico tree. And art historians can look at a painting and say, oh, that's an Angelico tree. Next, please. The Annunciation, again, these are about 1 meter by 2 meters tall in each monk's cell. He had this for his own private meditation. The angel here, this is painted in fresco on wet plaster. So it's not as detailed as these other paintings which he did in tempera. Now he would get much more fluid with his tempera painting, but these are basically washes on. They can only be done while the plaster is still wet. And these are in a sense quite modern. The color is a bit blurred in these because we have, they've just become dirty with time. Next, please. Here we see the angel's face, Mary's face looking at the angel with her sense of submission. Next, please. The Transfiguration, we have of course, Peter, James, and John, but again, the Dominican saints, we have Saint Scholastica, and there's Saint Dominic, and other saints involved. We're all supposed to be there. It's not just them. We're supposed to be there too. Next, please. St. Peter, viewing the Transfiguration, a tremendous human vision of Peter, absolutely appalled by this vision. Next, please. The coronation of the Virgin. We have here St. Dominic and St. Francis, St. Scholastic, some of the other Dominican saints here at the coronation of the Virgin. All we can say here is that both Christ and the Blessed Mother are dressed in white of spirituality, and they're joined together. There is this union. As he crowns her, they are joined together into one. Next, please. As Christ becomes one with his church. Close-up of the scene, this beautiful crown, the look on our Lord's face, the serenity, and the humility of the Blessed Mother. Next, please. St. Joachim, and the "Now you may dismiss my soul in peace, I've seen your glory." We have, of course, St. Dominic, St. Scholastica. That's the Beata Vianney. Anyway, the Dominican saints are involved once again. You're supposed to put yourself in the scene. Next, please. Close-up of St. Joachim. You can almost hear him saying his Nunc Dimittis. And the delightful Christ child, very human, yet very alive and sparkly. Next, please. Even the ceilings were painted by Fra Angelico, the four evangelists. No matter where you turned in the monastery, you were being inspired by his painting. Next, please. This is the Strozzi Descent from the Cross. You have, again, a theological painting where you have agitation of the actual moment on the stage right here, and the static explanation of the event of the philosopher's stage left over there. Close-up, please. Next, please. This is the close-up of the descending cross, the broken Christ, Magdalene at his feet, at his feet, kissing his feet, the Blessed Mother in a swoon, and over here we have the philosophers who are going to explain all the theologians who are going to explain the event. Next, please. This is a picture of St. Peter and his resignation at the scene. He's part of the active side. Next, please. The Magdalene kissing his feet. Tremendous tenderness of a human event. Next, please. This is one of the philosophers. Now, in those days, philosophers wore funny hats. One sees a bit of a vestige of this today at commencement exercises. But this is one of the doctors of the church who has read and studied and can explain to us what this whole event of the crucifixion means. Next, please. All right. Typical Fra Angelico town. He abstracted this. It could be a 20th century painting almost, of how he can put this into blocks and squares and give us the idea of a cityscape. Next, please. And, of course, a Fra Angelico tree on the other side. Next, please. Now, when he moved to Rome with Pope Eugenius, his style had somewhat changed. These are, again, frescoes, but this is the St. Peter conferring the treasures of the church on St. Sylvester. And he actually this was done under Pope Nicholas, because Pope Eugenius died, and he painted Pope Nicholas as St. Peter. I mean, it's a little deference to the Holy Father. But a bit in the influence of Masaccio, there's much more humanized personalities here, but still tremendous piety. But the fact that this one man is turning away gives it kind of that anecdotal quality. Next, please. The distribution of the alms of the church of this St. Lawrence. Again, very much Masaccio, the Pope with his tiara, very, very regal. Next, please. This, one of the most beautiful of that series, is the distribution of the alms of the church by St. Lawrence to the poor. Again, his idea of getting sanctity and humility, there's no fanfare in front of it. He's just simply doing what the church ought to do. The faces on the recipients are also very noble. These people are not cringing or begging, they are simply receiving. They know that they too are members of the mystical body of Christ. Next, please. Here we see from this same scene, St. Lawrence condemned to death. This is from a larger scene, in his cell, giving pardon to his executioners. The face again of the saint, St. Lawrence, with the two fingers raised in the benediction of Christ, true God and true man. He's giving the benediction of Christ. He is a priest. He may give this benediction to this man, and he's in this way giving this benediction to not only this man in the cell, sort of going to confession, so to speak, he's giving it to the whole group who is about to kill him. Next, please. These pictures are from the museum in New York, and they represent a completely new modern style. We have little time left. Let's move on a bit. 1 second. Again, very modern paintings, the transformation of the corn. Next, please. Close-up of the scene, this essential ship that he's abstracted. Next, please. Again, completely abstract squares from the St. Nicholas scene. The butterfly wings of the Medici silver chest, where, again, the iconography is all correct, but he puts his own personality. And the Tondo in the Washington, D.C., painted by him and Fra Lippo Lippi, where you see the swirl going past the Christ child and the Madonna. There are some, this was in Cosimo de' Medici's, in the Medici Palace, as a Fra Angelico. It contains, again, some repainting on here, such as the pheasant and the peacock. The pheasant and the peacock represent two Neoplatonic ideas of this coincidence of opposites. The peacock is the regal bird, the pheasant is the wild bird. That things must be fused together, that everything in the cosmos, it's a bit of this return to a Greek cosmos. Next, please. The Blessed Mother, flaxen hair, definitely Angelico's work. Next, please. The pheasant and the peacock. Next, please. Now, where this gets a little bit too Neoplatonic is that the Christ child, definitely painted by Angelico, has in his hand down here, painted in after, I am sure, it's like a little Pac-Man with teeth and an eye, and what you have is baby Jesus and baby devil, good and fusion of good and evil, which is obviously not good. Next, please. St. Dominic, this wonderful ability to paint the saint. How he did it, we don't know. Next. The angels, Vasari was right. I mean, the personality of the black angels, all different kinds of angels here. Next, please. The close-up of this wonderful angel, I mean, the piety of these angelic faces is just incredible. Next, please. And we're simply going to end on the effigy of the Beatus himself in the Church Sopra Minerva, in Maria Sopra Minerva in Rome, where he died in 1445. This is taken from a life mask, so we have some idea of what he looked like. There is definitely still pilgrimage to the site. Again, I say he was recognized in his own time as a saint, a living saint, and recognized in his own time as a genius. An incredible phenomenon that I don't know if it will be repeated in time, but it certainly is an exemplar to all of us who, like myself, are both Roman Catholics and practicing visual artists. So with that, we're going to end this session on the saint and the genius and a whole period in church and artistic history. We're going to move on to the High Renaissance in our next lecture and see something quite different. Thank you.